big pushback, and it's going to come from the right. Whether or not they'll be successful in undermining support for the program remains to be seen.
You got one follow-up there?
Yeah, one quick comment is I see a lot of resistance from, for example, those people who work in school systems like administrators.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, for example, I think there's already, I was interviewed by a writer for I've forgotten whether it was the American Federation of Teachers or the other union. And it was about my book, More Than Just Race, and it was never published. And I think one of the reasons it was never published is because of some of the things I said about the Harlem Children's Zone and the resistance to unions. And the union resistance to programs like this. And it became clear in the interview that he wasn't very enthusiastic about the Harlem Children's Zone and the charter schools. So I do think, yeah, there'll be pushback there too.
All right. Yes, we have another question here.
In Ohio, we've adopted fairly liberal rules about charter schools, and some people feel that the number of charter schools that aren't producing good results is indicative that charter schools are not a good idea. In a state like Ohio where we've had mixed results, what would you suggest happen differently going forward?
I would pay attention to those schools that are successful. Some charter schools have a terrible track record. And the Obama administration is fully aware of that. But what Arne Duncan wants to do is to create situations where it's possible to develop the best charter schools based on the evidence.
All right. Yes.
Professor Wilson, a couple of questions. And I know you have some influence with the Secretary of Education. And I think what's happening in the Harlem Children's Zone is really remarkable, especially with the promise schools. But as you know, I think there are 500 students in the promise schools in Harlem. There are 53,000 students in Wade County in South Carolina, and they've had amazing results, and it's not a charter school. Yeah. So what's curious to me is just to push for charter schools rather than pushing for successful schools. And a corollary to that is it can't simply be the ability to select teachers, because most charter schools have the freedom to select teachers, and most charter schools fail. And most charter schools will not have a Jeffrey Kennedy. So it seems to me that if we're really trying to figure out success, we should be a little more careful, a little more nuanced than saying we're going to push states to open up charter schools. So I wonder if you would comment about that.
Yeah, it is true that the Obama administration is pushing states to open up charter schools. But they're quite aware that there are good charter schools and bad charter schools. And what they're trying to do is promote the idea of effective, really good charter schools. You say, yeah, look, charter schools have the ability to select teachers, and some of the teachers that some of the charter schools have selected have been not very competent at all. The issue is the selection of good teachers. And what can we do to ensure the success of charter schools? Now, that question can't be answered if you're not encouraging the creation of charter schools. But I think you're quite correct that the Obama administration, if they are going to push charter schools, there's got to be some monitoring on how these charter schools are created and some control of how the funds are distributed, and they should be related to the quality of the program to create good charter schools. I want to go back to this other point you raised. South Carolina and other areas of the country that have promoted integrated schools. Would that be correct?
North Carolina, yes.
Yeah, I mean not South Carolina, North Carolina. And these are integrated schools that apparently are quite successful according to the research. Kohlenberg what's Cullenberg's first name? Richard Cullenberg writes a lot about how important it is to promote integrated schools. And he's talking about integration not so much in terms of class, but in terms of both class and not so much in terms of race, but in terms of both class and race, diversity, bringing people from different backgrounds together. And he says the research is quite impressive. And I think it's a good idea to allow that, to push that, to support that as well. Now, some of the programs to integrate schools will be more successful in some areas of the country than others. For example, if you're talking about integrated schools in Chicago or Detroit or Philadelphia, it's very, very difficult. It's much more difficult than it is in, say, North Carolina or some of these other areas where it's feasible maybe to bus kids from one area to another. But we should be open enough to say, look, this may work in this area, but it may not work in another area. But let's be open, let's be flexible, let's have the programs that are really successful, whether they are integrated schools or whether they are programs like the Harlem Children's School in certain neighborhoods. And we had this conversation earlier, and I was disappointed to learn that there's, well, maybe you don't want me to say this. Okay, I was disappointed to learn that there's little enthusiasm from the Obama officials that you talked to about promoting school integration.
And I guess just one follow-up. I guess what I would hope is that we would push and promote effective, successful schools.
Yeah.
Charter schools.
Just talk about successful schools, and then there are successful charter schools and successful non-charter schools. Yeah, okay, fine. I agree with that.
Yes.
I want to thank you very much for taking your time to come to The Ohio State University. I have a bit of a stacked question considering my previous life working with you and Professor Fryer. But I'm wondering if you would mind contrasting the long-term outcomes of Kennedy's Harlem program with Fryer's proposed pay for performance program. I don't know whether Fryer's program ever got off the ground.
No, it got off the ground, yeah.
But I don't know if there's a potential difference in impact with a combined cultural structural program versus a structural only program, and whether Fryer's program may solely be targeted at trying to raise the floor exponential. Thank you.
Well,
Professor Wilson, in answering that, could you tell us a little bit more about that program?
well,
Because we don't know.
Yeah, this is Bloomberg's program where you're going to pay kids to go to school and get good grades. There's a financial incentive to be a good student in school. And so these kids are receiving money, and the program, while they're in school, and the program is now being evaluated. I don't know the results. The preliminary evaluation seemed to suggest that the program has had some positive effect. But I haven't talked with Roland recently about that. Now, as far as the Harlem Children's Zone is concerned, that's not, he doesn't have this pay for performance is not a part of the Harlem Children's Zone evaluation.
Okay.
But I do think that the preliminary evidence does indicate that the pay for performance program has had some positive effects in increasing educational outcomes, including grades, as well as lowering of the school dropout rate.
Question here.
Yes, my question is relative to black kids in colleges. Looking at statistics, there's about 30% or low 30s when you look at the retention rate of black male in four-year colleges. What would you say are the driving factors why it's difficult to keep these black males that have actually made it out of the ghetto, made it out of high school, got into college, keeping them from graduating?
You know, there's something happening in the black community, and this pattern is also taking place in the white community, in that there's a growing gap between males and females